Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We've been reading William Shakespeare's Hamlet. This is Act 5, Scene 1. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for sticking with me for this. We're on the final lap. We left off with Ophelia dying and the king and Laertes plotting against Hamlet. Act 5, Scene 1, enclosure. There's a churchyard. Enter clowns, two clowns with spades, etc. I want to note that clowns in Shakespeare time are not like bozo clowns that we think of when we think of clowns. The clowns in Shakespeare time were basically rural men. They call them yokels, but they're basically clowns, funny people like a jester. They're not really, they're thrown in here for a specific reason. And that really is to talk about things that theoretically the other characters can't talk about. So they're kind of like a sidebar. But you'll see once we start this act why they're here and what they're talking about, because they will interface with the main character, Hamlet. First clown. Is she to be buried in Christian burial that willfully seeks her own salvation? There's the pronoun she. We don't know who she is, but we can guess since we know Ophelia just died. Second clown. I will tell thee she is, and therefore make her grave straight. The crowner hath sat on her and finds it Christian burial. So they talk a little bit differently than the other characters on purpose because they are, in fact, the sidebar, the clown, right? First clown. How can that be unless she drowns herself in her own defense? Why, it's so found, says the second clown. First clown. It must be se offendio. Offendio is apparently a perversion of a se defendo, the self-defense plea. So sometimes you'll find out that these clowns exaggerate or they're sharper than you think they are. You'll figure that out for yourself as you watch their dialogue. It must be so se offendio, it cannot be else. For here's the point, here lies the point. If I drown myself wittingly, it argues an act, and an act had three branches. It is to act, to do, to perform. Argal, she drowned herself wittingly. So they're arguing whether or not Ophelia killed herself, right? Argal is really used chiefly to imply the reasoning is absurd, like ergo. So he says argal, but it's ergo. So this is a little comic relief from the tragedy that's been unfolding. You know, you got Polonius being killed, Ophelia dying now, the king killing, Hamlet's father. Second clown. Nay, but you hear Goodman deliver. First clown. Give me leave. Here lies the water. Good. Here stands the man. Good. If the man go to this water and drown himself, it is, will he, nil he. He goes, mark you that. But if the water come to him and drown him, he drowns himself, not himself. Ergo, he that is not guilty of his own death shortens not his own life. Sorry. Second clown. But is this the law? First clown. Aye, marry. Isn't crowner quest law? Second clown. Will you have the truth on it? If this had not been a gentlewoman, she would have been buried out of Christian burial. First clown. Why, there you say it. And the more pity that Greek folk should have countenance in this world to drown or hang. So remember, these are gravediggers, clowns that are digging graves, right? There's a note here. Hawkins thinks the poet here meant to ridicule a case reported by Plowden. So Hawkins is another academic that believes Shakespeare is intending to ridiculed this case that happened here where he went to the water came to him, blah, blah, blah. And so you can read this note on your own, but I put a little question mark in here because I can't read Shakespeare's mind. I don't know any academic that can read Shakespeare's mind. I think Shakespeare had such a mind that sometimes his mind just read himself, like through genius. He's a genius, right? In any case, you don't have to worry about what Shakespeare did or did not intend. Just follow the clowns and what they're talking about. So the first clown says, in this world to drown or hang themselves more than they're even Christian. Come, my spade. There is no ancient gentleman but gardeners, ditchers, and gravediggers. They hold up Adam's profession. Second clown, was he a gentleman? First clown, he was the first that ever bore arms. You know, he's talking about, right, ladies and gentlemen? Adam and Eve, etc. Second clown, why, he had none arms. First clown, what, art thou a heathen? How dost thou understand Scripture? The Scripture says, Adam digged. Could he dig without arms? Sorry. I'll put another question to thee. If thou answerest me not to purpose, confess thyself. Well, go to, says the second clown. You can see how the audience could be a little relieved by these two characters talking. They remind me a little bit about Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, Vladimir and Estragon. That's another story. We'll maybe read that someday. First clown. What is he that builds stronger than either the mason, the shipwright, or the carpenter? Second clown. The gallows maker. For that frame outlives the 1,000 tenants. The first clown says, I like thy wit well in good faith. The gallows does well, but how does it well? It does well to those that do it in. Now thou dost ill to say the gallows is built stronger than the church? Ergo, the gallows may do well to thee. Then again, come, second clown. Who builds stronger than a mason, shipwright, or a carpenter then? Aye, tell me that and unyoke, second clown. Mary, now I can tell. To it, mass, I cannot tell, says the second clown. And here comes Hamlet and Horatio in a distance, to some distance. So that means they're off stage probably. First clown. Cudgel thy brains no more about it, for your dull ass will not mend his pace with beating. And when you are asked this question again next, say, a grave maker. That's the grave maker is the answer to his question, what builds stronger than a mason, shipwright, or carpenter? The first clown says it's the grave maker. That houses that he makes last till doomsday. Go, get thee to Yagen. Fetch me a stoup of liquor. The second clown leaves. So they want to do a little drinking, right? Okay. So he's digging and singing. A cudgel, by the way, is a short, thick stick used as a weapon. So he's saying, beat your brains no more about it. Digs and sings. In youth, when I did love, methought it was very sweet to contract all the time for all my behoove. Oh, methought there was nothing meet. Now, he's got a note here that the original ballad from whence these stanzas are taken is printed in Totals, Miscellaneous Songs and Sonnets. So apparently it's a real song. Hamlet. Has this fellow no feelings of his business that he's singing and grave making? So Hamlet's a little stunned that this guy's singing while he's digging graves. Horatio says, custom hath made it in him property of easiness. Custom has made it in him a property of easiness. He's done it so often, it's just easy. Hamlet. 'Tis even so, the hand of a little employment hath the daintier sense. You should have a little more sense. The first clown still singing. But age with his stealing steps hath clawed me in his clutch, and hath shipped me into the land as if it had never been such. And he throws up a skull. Hamlet, that skull had a tongue in it and could sing once. How the knave jowls it to the ground as if it were Cain's jawbone that did the first murder. It might be the pate of a politician, which this ass now overreaches, one that would circumvent God. Might it not? Horatio, it might, my lord. Or it could be a courtier, which could say, Good morrow, sweet lord. How dost thou, good lord? This might be my lord such and such one that praised my lord such and such a horse when he meant to beg it. Might it not? Aye, my lord. So they're speculating about what the skull might have been. Hamlet. Why, even so, why now, my lady Worms, chapless and knocked about the mazzard with the sexton's spade. Here's a fine revolution, as we had the trick to see it. Did these bones cost no more than the breeding, but to play at Laertes with them? Mine ache to think on it. Laertes are an old game in England by throwing pieces of wood at a stake in the ground. Almost like horseshoes, right? Sounds like. So he's got a little note here, 577 too, but we can ignore that. The skull that was in my lord, such is now my lady's worms. That's an academic talking. So Hamlet's and Horatio speculating on who the skull is and what the sexton, if you read Minister's Black Veil with me, you know a sexton was another word for gravedigger, right? Clown still singing. A pickaxe and a spade for a shrouding sheet. Oh, a pit of clay for to be made for such a guest is meet. He throws up another skull. Hamlet, there's another. Why, may not that be the skull of a lawyer? Where he be quiddities now, his quiddities. Quiddities are the inherent nature or essence of something or someone, and quillets is a quibble, an evasive distinction, probably legal terminology. His cases, his tenures, and his tricks? Why does he suffer this rude knave now to knock him about the sconce, hit him in the head with a dirty shovel, and will not tell him his action or battery? Hamlet's making fun of the lawyers, right? He's saying, how come he doesn't sue him? This fellow might have been in his time a great buyer of land. With the statutes, his recognitions, his fines, his double vouchers, his recoveries. Is this the fine of his fines and the recovery of his recoveries, to have his fine pate full of fine dirt? Will his vouchers vouch him no more, his purchases, and double ones too, than the length and breadth of a pair of his indentures? The very conveyances of his lands will hardly lie in this box. And must the inheritor himself have no more, huh? Not a jot more, my lord. Is not parchment made of sheepskins? Aye, my lord, and of calfskins too, so paper, right? Hamlet, they are the sheep and calves which seek out assurance in that. I will speak to this fellow. Whose grave is this, sir? See, sir, remember how they talk to each other? And even though he's talking to a quote-unquote clown rural guy, gravedigger, he accentuates the sir. Whose grave is this, sir? The first clown says, mine, sir. And then he keeps singing. Oh, a pit of clay for to be made for such a guest as meet. Hamlet says, I think it be thine indeed, for thou liest in it. Now here we go again. What are we doing here, ladies and gentlemen? We're word fencing. Remember, entertainment, the way they talk to each other, they were very clever people. They had no television to entertain them, no cell phones, right? This is language charged with meaning. So Hamlet says, whose grave is this? And the first clown says, mine. So the implication you can think of, is he digging his own grave? Dig your own grave? No. But he says it's mine because it is his. So mine has a double meaning. It's mine, but it's not mine. You see what I'm saying? I think it be thine indeed, for thou liest in it, says Hamlet. First clown, you lie out on it, sir, and therefore it is not yours. For my part, I do not lie in it, and yet it is mine. Not so stupid, is he? Hamlet says, thou dost lie in it, to be in it, and say it is thine. It is for thy dead, not for the quick. Therefore thou liest. You're lying. First clown, it's a quick lie, sir. It will away gain from me to you. What man do you dig this for? Oh, for no man, sir. What woman then? Oh, for none, neither. So he's not digging it for man or woman. See word fencing? Hamlet, well, who's to be buried in it? First clown, one that was a woman, sir. Which, rest her soul, she's dead. You see what I'm saying about the cleverness of the words that they interchange with each other? If you go back and you reread some of those earlier acts when Hamlet's talking to like Yorick or whatever, you'll see it in the word fencing that they're really using words with sometimes double, triple meanings. Hamlet says, how absolute the knave is. He calls him a knave, right? And we talked about knave. We must speak by the card, or equivocation will undo this. By the Lord, Horatio, these 3 years I have taken note of it. The age is grown so picked that the toe of the peasant comes so near the heel of the courtier, he grafts his kibe. How long has this been? Well, then he stops talking to Horatio. In other words, he's saying, this age we live in is really weird because, the peasant is right on the heels of the courtier. And he uses 588 as a footnote. Kibe is an old word for chilblain, whatever that means. Kibe. He gaffs his kibe. He gaffs his way of talking. How long hast thou been a grave maker? First clown. Of all the days of the year. I came to it that day that our last King Hamlet overcame Fortinbras. Remember what happened in the first act? Well, how long is that since, says Hamlet. First clown. Can you not tell that? Every fool can tell that. It was the very day that the young Hamlet was born. He that is mad. And they sent him to England. So the first clown doesn't know he's talking to Hamlet, does he? No. And he says when Hamlet was born that he is mad. There's everybody, the rumors are spreading, and he was sent to England. So this is a summing up of what the people know. That's what the clown represents, right? The folks, the people, right? The people. Hamlet. Hi, Mary. Why was he sent to England? First clown. Why? Because he was mad. He shall recover his wits there. Or, if he do not, it's no great matter there. In other words, don't forget, Shakespeare was English, right? In England. He lived in England. This is a Denmark play. It takes place in Denmark. And he's basically saying if Hamlet goes to England and recover his wits, but if he doesn't, it's no great matter there. They understand how to deal with madmen, right? Or they're all mad. Hamlet says, why? 'Twill not be seen in him there. There, the men are mad as he is. So this is a jibe at England, where Shakespeare lives. They're all mad. Hamlet, see how Hamlet's probing How came he be mad? First clown. Very strangely, they say. Hamlet. How strangely? Faith. Losing his wits. Upon what ground? Why, here in Denmark, I have been sexton here, man, boy, 30 years. So, upon what ground? Well, I've been here as sexton 30 years. How long will a man be in the earth ere he rot? See how they transition from talking about how you lose your wits into somehow the clown got him to talk about his, when he says, upon what ground? Like losing his wits, faith, first clown, losing his wits. Upon what ground? The first clown didn't understand the word ground. What was the basis of him losing his wits? So the first clown says, here in Denmark, I've been a sexton 30 years on the ground. How? And then Hamlet picks that up and says, how long will he be in the ground before he rots? First clown. Faith. Where's it? You remember the second clown's not there. If he not be rotten before a die, as we have many pocky corpses nowadays, that will scarce hold the laying in, will last some 8 years or 9 years. A tanner will last you 9 years. Pocky corpses is afflicted with pockmarks. Don't forget there's a plague, right? Plague is a common thing in these days, 400 years ago. So as if we had many, if he didn't rot before he died, because we got many pocky corpses. And he says a tanner is a person who tans animal hides to earn a living, right? Like Jimmy's grandfather was a tanner. Died of cancer from the tanning. It's a horrible way to earn a living. But somebody's got to do it. Hamlet. Why he more than another? First clown. Why, sir, his hide is so tanned with his trade that he'll keep out of water a great while. Your water is a sore decayer of your horse-son dead body. Here's the skull now. This skull has lain in the earth 23 years. Whose skull was it? Whose was it? Asks Hamlet. First clown. A horse son and fellow it was. Whose do you think it was? Nay, I don't know, said Hamlet. I know not. First clown. A pestilence on him for a mad rogue. Poured a flagon of remish on my head once. Now, the clown obviously recognizes this skull. This same skull, sir, was Yorick's skull, the king's jester. Hamlet says, this? Aye, that. Hamlet says, let me see. And he takes the skull. This is one of the most famous speeches in the play. Take our time reading it. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of the most excellent fancy. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times, and now how abhorred in my imagination it is. My gorge rims at it. He hung those lips that I have kissed I know not how often. Where be your jibes now? Your gambols, your songs, your flashes of merriment that were wont to set the table in a roar. Not one now to mock your own grinning, quite chapfallen. Now get you to my lady's chamber and tell her, let her paint an inch thick. To this favor she must come. Make her laugh at that. Come on. Prithee, Horatio, tell me one thing. What's that, my lord? Do you think Alexander looked like this fashion in the earth? He's asking Horatio if Alexander the Great, you know why he's called the Great, he conquered most of the world, right? Ere so, even so. And smelt too? Puts down the skull. Even so, my lord. To what base uses we may return, Horatio? Why not Imagination traced the noble dust of Alexander till he find it stopping a bunghole. So he's asking, how come, if we all turn to dust, you find it plugging a bunghole? Horatio, well, 'twere to consider too curiously to consider so. No, faith, not a jot, but to follow him thither with modesty enough and the likelihood to lead it, as thus. Alexander died, Alexander was buried, Alexander returneth into dust, and the dust is earth, and the earth we make loam, and why of that loam whereto it was converted might it not stop a beer barrel? The cycle of, so they're contemplating if Alexander, is going to take the same position as Yorick and become just a skull or dust, whatever, eventually he might be used to stop a beer barrel. Cycle of life. Loam is a fertile soil, clay, and sand containing humus, right? Imperious Caesar, dead and turned to clay, might stop a hole to keep the wind away. Hamlet's creating a poem. Oh, that the earth which kept the world in awe should patch a wall to expel the winter flaw. Now, he's got a note here, the editor. A flaw is a violent gust and blast of wind. He's not saying that, but Hamlet is actually making a little rhyme up. But soft, soft. Here comes the king, the queen, the courtiers. So enter the priests, the corpse of Ophelia, Laertes, the mourners, the king. So here comes a whole bunch of people. Who is this they found? Says Hamlet. And with such maimed rites, this doth betoken the corpse that they followed did with desperate hand forego its own life. To some estate, couch we a while and mark. So something's going on here. It doesn't look right. We're going to mark it. Retiring, with Horatio. Laertes, what ceremony else? Hamlet, that's Laertes, a very noble youth. Laertes, what ceremony else? Priest, her obscuries have been as far enlarged as we have warranted. Her death was doubtful, but the great command overweighs the order that she should in ground unsanctify have lodged, till the last trumpet for charitable players. Shreds, flints, and pebbles should be thrown on her, yet here she is allowed her virgin krantz. Okay? Shards are pieces of broken ceramic. Obscuries, funeral or burial ceremony. So they're basically putting her, right? They're not using the full ceremony of burial because her death was doubtful. You remember how she died? She fell off the branch. Now, when they say doubtful, that could have been construed because don't forget she was actually mad. Right? She was losing it, singing all the time, whatever. So they're saying that maybe it was suicide, but it wasn't suicide, but it's doubtful. So they're not giving her the full benefit of the rites. Got it? So krantz is an old word for garlands. She's allowed her virgin garlands. She's a virgin, so she could keep the flowers on her head or whatever, wherever they put it. Got it? Okay. Her maiden struments and the bringing home of bell and burial. Laertes, must there be no more done? No more be done. We should profane the service of the dead to sing a requiem, and such rest to her as to peace parted souls. Profane, outside the temple, not sacred. They don't want to profane the service of the dead, says the priest. Laertes, lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. I tell thee, churchless priest, a ministering angel shall my sister be when thou liest howling. You churchless, you vulgar priest. Laertes ticked off because they're not giving his sister the rights, right? So he lashes out at the priest. This is a suggestion of his character. Hamlet. What? The fair Ophelia? Queen. Sweets to the sweets, farewell. She scatters flowers. I hope that thou shouldst have been my Hamlet's wife. I thought thy bride bed to have decked sweet maid, and not have strewed the grave, thy grave. They don't know Hamlet is there listening, and the queen says, I hoped that thou should have been Hamlet's wife. See, they had high hopes for Ophelia. Laertes, O terrible woe, fall 10 times trouble on that cursed head. Don't forget, he figures Hamlet's the guy whose wicked deed thy most ingenious sense deprived thee of. Hold off the earth a while till I have caught her once more in my arms. And he jumps into the grave. Now pile your dust, the quick and the dead, till this flat of mountain you have made. Top her over Pelion on the skyish head of blue Olympus. Pelion was a mountain in southeastern Thessaly and northern Greece. So he's basically saying, bury me with her, right? Hamlet comes advancing. He comes out of this. What is he whose grief bears such an emphasis, whose phrase of sorrow conjures the wandering stars and makes them stand like wonder-wounded hearers? This is I, Hamlet, the Dane. And he leaps into the grave. Laertes, the devil take thy soul. They start grappling. Hamlet, pray not that prayer not while I prithee take your fingers from my throat. For I am not splentive and rash. I'm not passionate. Take your fingers from my throat. Yet I have something in me dangerous, says Hamlet, which let thy wiseness fear. Hold off thy hand. The king says, pluck them asunder, split them up. Queen, Hamlet, this is all, gentlemen, scream everybody else, right? Horatio, good my lord, be quiet, please. They're trying to break up the scuffle in Ophelia's grave. Holy mackerel. The attendants part them and they come up out of the grave. Hamlet says, well, I will fight with him upon this theme, the theme, whatever that is, until my eyelids will no longer wag. He's a fighter, the theme. The queen says, what theme? Hamlet says, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum of love. What wilt thou do for her? What wilt thou do for her? He's asking. Yeah, I loved Ophelia more than anybody, than 40,000 brothers. King, he's mad, Laertes. You see what the king's doing here? He's mad, Laertes. Queen, for the love of God, forbear him, restrain him. Swan, show me what thou wilt do. Would thou weep? Would thou fight? Would you fast? Would you tear yourself? Would you drink up? Vessel? Vessel, you can see as a footnote down here, not important. Eat a crocodile? I'll do it. Dost thou come here to whine? To outface me with leaping in her grave? Be buried quick with her, and so will I. And if thou prate of mountains, let them throw millions of acres on us, till our ground swinging in his pate against his burning zone make Ossa, right? That's another mountain. Like a wart, nay, like 1,000 mouths. I'll rant as well as thou. So Hamlet's basically taking up the challenge and saying, okay, if you want to do that, let's go put ourselves in the grave as well. Now, some of you may be wondering why this is really exaggerated, right? What is it? When Jimmy was a young man and his grandfather died, remember that was the one I told you was a tanner. When his grandfather died, and it was at the wake, when his second wife, the step-grandmother, evil step-grandmother, another time for another story, came into to the funeral parlor, she ran up ran up to the casket and physically lifted my grandfather from that casket to hug him. Now, Jimmy was a young boy at that time, but it made an impression on him. And when he read Hamlet years later, this was, he related to this. So I'm just saying that part of what we want to do is understand, and I'm sure there are some of you in the audience, if you've been with me reading Hamlet, that have seen such a scene. That is an extraordinary experience, the death of a loved one. And it makes people do things that you don't normally do. Now, subsequently, we can argue, and I could argue, that my step-grandmother's action was an act. And this is not an act. Hamlet is not, he's basically, was Laertes acting? I don't know. Was he serious about having being buried with his sister? And Hamlet's just matching him and saying, let's go together. Come on. Any case, Queen, this is mere madness. And thus, a while, the fit will work on him. Anon, as patient as the female dove, what with her golden couplets are disclosed. Going. His silence will sit drooping. Hamlet, hear you, sir. What is the reason that you use me thus? I loved you, ever, but it is no matter. Let Hercules himself do what he may. The cat will mew, and the dog will have his day. Remember the rhyming, May Day? Let Hercules himself do what he may. The cat will mew, and the dog will have his day. King, I pray you, good Horatio, wait on him. Hamlet leaves. Horatio leaves. And then the king says to Laertes, strengthen your patience in our last night's speech. We'll put the matter to the present push. Good Gertrude, set some watch over your son. This grave shall have a living monument. An hour of quiet shortly shall we see, and until then, in patience, our proceeding be. And he leaves. Remember, there's not fully disclosed why Laertes is ticked off at Hamlet. There's confusion. We know because we've been watching the characters interact. This is Act 1 of this is Scene 1 of the final Act 5 of the entire play. So I want you to keep that in mind. This exaggeration, whatever. Hamlet loved Ophelia. The queen wanted Ophelia to marry Hamlet, so that's becoming apparent now, right? So there's a lot of emotion going on here, a lot of feeling, and that's what's important to do. Don't forget, Aristotle said, catharsis. You want to feel pity for these people. So the king leaves and say, bide your time, and they're gonna figure it out on how to kill Hamlet. So you've been reading with Jimmy. Thank you for visiting. That was Scene 1 of Act 5 of Hamlet. Remember, if you have questions, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Thanks for staying with me, and look forward to finishing the play shortly.